out for a minute or so, hopefully not a minute. Okay, welcome to the meeting. Just a reminder that your cameras and your microphones are switched off. We will deal with questions after the guest speaker's presentation, and you are welcome to use the Q&A section or the chat section if you have any questions. If you want to know how to get there, I know not everybody has a Q&A section, but look at the top and you will see the chat section over there and the Q&A section under the orange arrow. I've placed this picture under the chat function as well so that you can see it if you are not quick enough to look for it right now. Okay, so welcome again. Our training topic for today is employees and nutrition. We'll introduce the speaker shortly. And then after that, the back to basics presentation is on urine dipsticks and how to read it. Then we will quickly go through, not go through the minutes, but just mention the minutes and present it for acceptance. And then we will provide portfolio feedback for those committee members who are in the meeting. And after that, if there's no questions, we will close the meeting. Okay, I hand over to Lindy. Lindy is going to introduce our first speaker. Lindy, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joannette. So while I am introducing Kelly Francis, I'm going to ask Kelly to start sharing her presentation. So Kelly Francis completed her BSc Dietetics degree and a postgrad diploma in hospital dietetics through the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She was sent to Kimberley in the Northern Cape for community service here. So I'm sure, Kelly, you do understand a little bit of Afrikaans after working in the Northern Cape. And after spending an additional year working in the rural clinic, she opened her practice at Westville Hospital. She's been in private practice now for 15 years, and her special interests include diabetes, women's health, and childhood nutrition. Passion lies with nutrition education and currently enjoying mainly outpatient work on a part-time basis. So Kelly, I thank you for your preparation and your presentation, and I'm handing over to you. To hear you, if you are talking, are you unmuted? Kelly, can you hear me? Because I can't hear you. Guys, can you hear me? If somebody can just indicate maybe in the chat group if they can hear us.
Yes, we can hear you. We just can't hear Kelly.
Okay, let me phone Kelly.
Okay, while she's busy, let me just share my screen again with you. If you hang on for a moment, I want to get there. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have had a chance to work through the minutes. Can I have one person to propose the minutes, please? Ellen, thank you very much. And Ellen Conradi, and then one person to second that. Rina Els, and Estelle Bornman. Thank you very much. That's taken care of. Let me just write this down, otherwise I'm going to forget. Okay, Adele, are you available to quickly go through the finances with us?
Joanette?
Yes.
Can we just see if Kelly can now connect?
Sure. Kelly? Still can't hear her.
Still can't hear you, Kelly.
You can see you talk, but we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Oh.
I wonder what's going on.
Yeah. Mystery. Okay, we'll give us some time to sort that out, and in the meantime, we can continue with the meeting if you don't mind. Adele, are you available to present the finances quickly?
Yes, Joanette.
Thank you, Adele.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just want to have a quick go through our latest statement. It's still the one of June, because we're still busy with July. I can just point out to the income of the workshops. We had a mini mental workshop, which brought in some money. So it was standing at 59,800 and now it's 66,100. So thank you for that. And then we've had with that workshop some meeting I'm losing my signal here. Okay, can you hear me, Joanette?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me, Kelly?
Now we
Okay,
can hear you. Okay,
Oh,
let Adele
okay,
quickly
good.
finish with the finances, then
All
we'll
right,
give you a
that's
chance.
fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Closing balance is 197,201, and our
Okay.
upcoming workshop will make the finances look even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Adele. Wonderful. Kelly, you can share your screen.
Okay, let's do it again.
There you go. Wonderful.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. And we did try it earlier, so I don't know what happened. Okay.
Technology always happens.
All right. So I'm very happy to be with you today, sharing nutrition for the occupational health practitioner. And I really always just want to start with the importance of optimal nutrition. So this may be something that you are aware of, but it's always worth recapping. And the importance would be to provide energy and nutrients for optimal functioning of the body, meeting the required daily demands of the body, to prevent chronic diseases related to lifestyle and dietary intake, and to promote quality of life through all life stages. And I think often people forget this part. And what is optimal nutrition? It's consuming foods that contribute essential nutrients such as fiber, protein, vitamins, and minerals. Energy consumed via food should also come with nutrient benefit. So we should be limiting foods that contribute saturated fats, salts, and sugar, and avoiding what we call empty energy foods, foods that have energy but no other nutrient value. So essentially, they're not offering you a benefit by consuming them. Eating regular meals of appropriate portion to maintain a healthful weight. And this means not being underweight or overweight. Regular movement, no smoking, limited use of alcohol, and limited use of caffeine. And then I like to talk a bit about food language. The definition of the word diet was originally just relating to habitual food intake. So the word diet did not originally describe a restriction in food intake. Okay, so a person either habitually eats a healthy diet or they habitually eat an unhealthy diet. But I would like to rephrase. I don't like to use the term healthy diet or unhealthy diet anymore. I prefer to talk about a nutrient-dense diet or a nutrient-poor diet because of the wealth of information on the internet, which has led to a very wide interpretation and a misinterpretation of what a healthy diet actually is. And it is very important to consume a variety of nutrient-dense foods as far as your budget will allow. And I truly believe that no matter a person's circumstance, provided they have some kind of income and are purchasing food for themselves, a person's overall diet, no matter how scant it may be or how much food they are able to buy, will be nutrient poor or nutrient dense based on the food choices that they make. What is a nutrient dense diet? A nutrient dense diet is one that contributes 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. It is adequate in energy and protein. It has got plant-based fats as opposed to being high in animal fats, which are saturated in nature. And it has got lots of vitamins and minerals, which the body needs. And we have enough hydration with water. And it's important to view water as a nutrient. And I really like to always focus on fiber. And this is something that I talk a lot about to my clients. Focus on fiber. And if you can get this right, you're 2/3 of the way or more to meeting your nutrient-dense diet. So the benefits of fiber: stabilizing blood glucose levels, which is very important for all people, but we know especially for people living with diabetes, reduces cholesterol, sustains energy between meals, which helps to reduce unnecessary snacking, but it also helps us to have the energy for the demands of the day. We're living in a time where stress is high, the daily grind is real, and we need sustained energy between meals. Fiber promotes the feeling of fullness, which helps to help maintain a healthy weight, and again reduces unnecessary snacking between meals. Fiber prevents constipation, which is much more important than what people might realize. And fiber feeds the probiotic bacteria in the gut. Fiber, as much as we need to think about it as a nutrient, is not a nutrient that we absorb like protein, glucose, vitamins, minerals, and fats. It just stays in the gut and passes out. We do not actually need it. Our probiotic bacteria need it. Our gut needs it. Our digestive system needs it. And sources of fiber would be whole grains, namely oats, brown rice, barley, samp, corn, popcorn, and whole grain products such as whole wheat breads or crackers, bran flakes, Weet-Bix. Essentially, any packaged product must have 6 grams of fiber or more per 100 grams of the product. So you can see that in the nutritional information. But most products that have this content of fiber will put a high fiber claim somewhere on the package because it's certainly a benefit, health benefit, and they'll want to advertise that. So it's really important to get fiber when you're choosing convenience foods, packaged foods. You want a high fiber product. Vegetables and fruits are naturally high in fiber. And legumes, so dried or canned beans, lentils, and split peas are high in fiber. And really you need 6 to 10 servings of fiber-rich food to achieve that 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. Now, 30 grams doesn't sound like a lot, but an apple might give you 3 grams of fiber, depending on the size of the apple, 3 to 4. And if you peeled it for any reason, you would lose a good amount of that fiber. So it is actually quite difficult to meet fiber requirements, and you have to be mindful and intentional about meeting fiber requirements. And then the other strong message of the day is to include adequate protein. We need protein for muscle synthesis and repair. We need it for wound healing. And remembering that from the age of 30 years, muscle mass begins to decline, and building muscle, which is our lean body mass, becomes more difficult with each decade thereafter. In later years, independence can be significantly reduced by low muscle mass. So if you think of our elderly population who can no longer drive or walk upstairs or do their own shopping, it's because of this loss of muscle. And while bone health is important in elderly years to prevent fractures, strong muscles actually help to prevent the falls in the first place. Strong muscles are built in earlier life and must be maintained with exercise and adequate protein in latter life. It's very important when it comes to protein that we choose lean, minimally processed protein as far as possible. Okay, it is important to remove any visible fat from meat and chicken. It's important to choose lean mince if possible. Obviously, these things are always a bit more expensive, so that's why I say if possible. Limit highly processed meat and poultry products such as sausages and deli meats without the meat grain. So cold sandwich meats should ideally still have the meat grain. They've been cut thin slices off of a roast piece of meat. And avoiding crumbed meat and poultry products is advised. It's a twofold reason. The crumbs add a lot of carbohydrate that doesn't have fiber or nutrients, but also if you take a product like this, the protein content is actually much lower than what you think you're getting. And if I just think of one example of a boxed fish, Fish Friday, has 20 grams of carbohydrate per piece of fish. That's more than a slice of bread, and that's purely in the batter on that fish. So you eat that fish thinking that you are having a protein source, and it does, of course, contain protein because it has got a nice piece of fish in there, but then you add to that some kind of starch, and there's no fiber in that batter. So for a person, especially living with diabetes, that type of protein source is problematic for their blood glucose levels. For a person that's trying to lose weight, that extra carbohydrate load is going to be problematic from an extra energy point of view. So that meal is suddenly much higher in energy than what they realize that they're consuming. It is also important to avoid meat pies and pastries as a protein source. Again, very little protein hidden in a lot of carbohydrate that's high in fat and low in fiber. Limiting cheese is advisable because of its saturated fat content, but specifically very important to avoid things like processed cheese slices. So there is room for cheese if you're using it as a meat substitute, but be careful about adding cheese to meals that already contain meat. Include eggs, beans, lentils, and low-fat dairy in meat-free meals to ensure an adequate protein intake. And then if we look at vitamins and minerals, fiber-rich foods and lean sources of protein, eggs, and dairy products are all rich in the vitamins and minerals that the body needs to maintain optimal health with reduced risk for disease. So if you are meeting your fiber requirements, then you are taking in a lot of vitamins and minerals just because of the food choices that you are making to achieve the fiber intake. And now if we look specifically at nutrition in the workplace, we're going to look at food and mood, smart snacking, shift work nutrition, preventing and managing chronic disease, nutrient-dense eating on a budget, and building a healthy workplace culture. And if we look at food and mood, unfortunately, it really is a vicious cycle. Stress can promote poor nutrient intake for a number of reasons. Lack of time, overeating due to overwhelm or procrastination. People often skip meals when they are stressed or very busy or have too much to do. Eating too quickly, grabbing convenient options that are not nutrient dense in nature, relying on coffee and energy drinks instead of food and or even sleep, snacking on highly processed foods rather than eating proper meals. For example, crisps, chocolates, energy bars, sweets, grabbing something from a vending machine or a garage shop or something like that. When we are stressed, our personal health care, which is our nutrition and our exercise, is often the first ball that we drop. And the reason is because most often this is the only ball we can drop. We can't drop our job. We can't drop our families. So it's ourselves, it's our nutrition is often the only thing we can drop. So it's the first thing we drop. And the vicious part is that optimal nutrition is actually what we need in times of stress. It provides energy for the task at hand. It provides important nutrients for the brain, for mental capacity as well as mental health. Good nutritious food can help to reduce brain fog and promote mental clarity. It can stabilize our energy levels, our blood glucose levels, which in turn can stabilize our mood. Adequate nutrition and appropriate hydration with water literally enhances our capacity to cope. And I want to look very closely at hydration because it's very, very important. Most people don't drink enough water, and dehydration has many negative consequences. But also, what are people relying on? Excessive caffeine intake can have a negative impact on mood by increasing the feeling of anxiety. So people who drink a cup of coffee after coffee after coffee as a coping mechanism, as a crutch, as a meal replacement, because they don't have time to food, but it suppresses the hunger, or they feel it's keeping them awake or giving them energy, it actually can have a negative impact on their stress levels or the feeling of anxiety. Excessive intake of caffeinated beverages or energy drinks can reduce food intake and therefore reduce nutrient intake, and that's a problem. Energy drinks can be harmful, especially for those with underlying conditions. Excessive intake of caffeine can disturb sleep, which can negatively impact both performance and mood. And excessive urination as a result of excessive intakes of caffeine without adequate water can lead to dehydration. And you can be dehydrated before you actually feel thirsty. And dehydration, you can have many negative symptoms can be experienced as a result of being dehydrated, including fatigue, joint pain, lower back pain, headaches, dizziness, muscle cramps, constipation. And all of these things will impact your mood and how you feel and how you're able to perform at work, how you're able to enjoy your day at work, and then how you're able to function when you get home at the end of the day. And dehydration really does lead to reduced performance in physical work or exercise. So it depends on the nature of your job, but dehydration can really impact the way in which you perform, which is an important part of your job. If we look at the role of the occupational health practitioner, when you are talking with someone, you can discuss the importance of food choices for the improvement of mood, or when you're giving wellness talks or one-on-one. You can create posters to encourage a variety of high fiber foods such as oats, brown rice, lentils, incorporating color into the diet with vegetables and fruits, and the inclusion of quality protein sources such as fatty fish, beans, plain yogurt, eggs, chicken. I often have to remind myself, and I think this applies to all healthcare practitioners, we know more than the average person about healthy living and healthy eating. And some people just don't really know much at all. And so it might seem simple to put up a poster about high fiber foods. But actually, a lot of my clients say, well, what is fiber? What foods have fiber? People just don't know. So this would go a long way to getting the message out there. It's also very important to discuss the importance of hydrating with water and sending regular reminders for this important message. And also remember to discuss the barriers to optimal hydration. Why aren't people drinking enough water? And what can they do to overcome these barriers? Then the next section would be to do with smart snacking. And basically, whole foods are smart snacks. It's really important to avoid highly processed snacks, no matter the health claim. So any packaged snacks are very expensive, and the healthier they claim to be, the more expensive they are, but they're also often very deceptive. So, for example, an oat-based energy bar might seem like a healthy snack choice, but it can contain as many calories as a chocolate and is not as nutrient dense as an alternative whole food snack for the same price. So it's not going to have as much fiber, even though it seems like, well, it's got oats, it must be great. It's got to have a high amount of sugar. Some of them have chocolate on them, and they sell for around 16 Rand plus. So if they've got a bit of added protein in them, they're going to be even more. If you buy it at a garage shop, it's probably going to be closer to 20 Rand for a basic oat bar. And it's probably also not going to be very filling for very long, and you're going to be looking for another snack shortly after. It would be far more nutrient dense option to spend that money and maybe couple of Rand extra, but not really, on a plain yogurt and an apple. So carrying your own snacks from home would be first prize, but even if you have to buy a snack, you would be able to buy that yogurt and an apple for a similar price to an energy bar or less. And you would have a more filling snack, a higher protein content from the plain yogurt, and a good amount of fiber from the apple, vitamins and minerals, calcium from the yogurt, and yeah, a much more filling snack for sure. And no added sugar. So that would be the most important factor there. And very little saturated fat. So in general, smart snacking would be fresh fruit, eating one portion at a time. I often find that people report eating 2 fruits at a time. Generally, just eat one fruit portion at a time, but you can have up to 3 portions of fruit throughout your day. 1 cup of chopped fruit would be considered 1 portion. When we talk about diabetes, we're looking at a tennis ball sized portion. So it is important not to overdo it on fruit with people living with diabetes, but fruit is an important part of the diet, even for diabetes. So there's often a misconception that people with diabetes should be careful of fruit or certain types of fruits. This is not true, but portion size is important, and definitely only eating 1 portion in a sitting. When it comes to dried fruit, it's a closed handful of dried fruit because it's dehydrated. So if you think of 2 dried pear halves being 1 pear, you shouldn't be eating more than that. And as I said, 3 portions a day, that should be the total. We shouldn't really be eating more fruit than that. If you've got a large banana, that's going to count as 2 fruits. Raw vegetables make for an excellent smart snack choice. You could also make up a little salad with diced cucumber and diced tomato with vinegar or lemon juice. That can be quite satisfying as an afternoon snack. You could always put a dollop of plain yogurt on that as well. Nuts should be raw, unsalted. A closed handful is a suitable portion. Popcorn, you could have up to 3 cups of popped popcorn, best made homemade, very lightly salted. And that would be a lovely mid-afternoon snack, very high in fiber, a much better alternative to crisps. Homemade vegetable soup, a nice cup of homemade vegetable soup in the afternoon to tide you over before dinner. Plain yogurt, peanut butter, a boiled egg. All of these are suitable snacks, and depending on your hunger or the person, so if it's a child versus a grown adult, you can pair 2 or 3 of them together to build a suitable snack that's going to get you going to your next meal without hunger. And all of these snacks would be suitable for a person living with diabetes as well. The role of the occupational health practitioner, starting a Smart Snack Awareness Week, Snack Smart Awareness Week. Again, creating posters, being visual really helps people to remember the message, to see examples. That's very, very important. Prepare a food display of snack options. So if you have food models or empty food boxes, pictures of foods, just making it easy for them to see without even necessarily having to stop and read something. So even if they just walk past the table, they will get some ideas. You can also do an exercise where you compare the costs of highly processed convenient snacks and the smart snack examples. And you can also challenge employees to approach employers if their canteen does not offer smart snack options, because sometimes this is where the problem starts, is if there's no options for people to buy and they get caught out because they haven't bought something, or there's all these temptations in their canteen. It's really important that if the place of work, if the employer wants healthy employees, that they also make it easier for the employees to be able to access healthy snacks and meals. Then if we look at shift work nutrition, this is a bit of a conundrum, and many people, as we know, do shift work, and yeah, it is a big barrier to achieving good nutrition and a healthy lifestyle, but it can be done. So navigating nutrition and shift work is tricky, but the nutrient requirements remain the same, and therefore a solution is necessary. So it's important to plan a breakfast, a lunch, dinner, and snacks, but these meals do not, however, have to be eaten in the conventional order. Some people prefer not to have a heavy meal before trying to sleep. So once they go home after their shift, they prefer something light, while some find having a heavy meal while they're on shift makes them sleepy. So an individual approach is definitely necessary. Also, shifts may change. So some people work different shifts. There'll be 2 day shifts on, then 2 night shifts on, then 2 days off. So not all people work the same shift continuously, and that's even more tricky. But ultimately, every 24 hours must contain 3 meals as nutrient dense as the budget allows. It's important that people do their best to prepare meals ahead of time, and that would be on their off days. So either they preparing some lunches for the fridge 3 days ahead, they're preparing bulk and freezing, but it's very important that when they do have time off, that they use this time to prepare for their shifts. And it's always best to carry food rather than buying food. It's always going to be more cost effective. And while it seems like it's quicker to buy food and you don't have time, ultimately, if you plan and you do your shopping and you just take a couple of hours in the week to prep ahead, you do end up saving time. Because every time you go into a shop to buy food, that's time. And that adds up. So eat a meal before leaving for a shift. That's always a good advice. Then you know that you've met some nutrient requirements before your shift has begun. Eat a meal in the middle of a shift and eat a meal towards the end of the shift. The nature of these meals, whether they are big or small, like main or light or snacks, is going to depend on the person. But that is sort of the structure that you want to have. So not going more than 3 to 4 hours without eating, and making sure that making nutrient-dense choices. Shifts are most often 12 hours, hours, which leave sleep, exercise, and family time to fit into the second 12 hours. So it's best to cover the bulk of nutrition within the shift as far as possible. And then another thing to option, if time is a problem, is to use family meals from the day before. So if a person is living with their family and the family is preparing meals day in and day out, then the person can use family meals from the day before. So they will be a day behind on the family meal and they can carry that to work. And very important, hydration remains equally important. The role of the occupational health practitioner is really to help employees create a personal strategy for meeting their nutritional goals in spite of working night shifts. I think this is one of the most critical areas where individualization is important, because the structure of this workday or night, should we say, is not easy, because 9 times out of 10, they're not going home and having 8 hours of sleep. So their nutrition actually really is supporting an unnatural lifestyle. So it's very important that they meet their nutrient goals, that they fit in some exercise, that they're getting sleep, and that we help them to find a way to overcome the barriers that they have to meeting their nutrient goals. You could create a visual food schedule with preferred choices from the canteen, if there is a canteen, and that is what people are relying on. So it's really important just to prompt those good nutrient-dense choices. What people hear and see from you, they can't unhear or unsee. So if you're just continuously putting the message out there, it will get across. People will eventually start making those choices. They will at least know that they should be making those choices. And very important to discuss hydration and sleep. Then if we take a look at chronic disease, because this is very prevalent, in many workplaces, you will find many people living with diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, complications thereof, such as renal disease, but a lot of people living with heart disease, and a lot of people living with obesity. And we know that these people are at risk for chronic disease. So we're really looking at both the prevention and management of chronic diseases. So dietary intake can improve or worsen chronic disease. Fiber, I mentioned that this would come up again. I mentioned how important it is and how much stress how I would emphasize it. It plays a major role in improving blood glucose levels and reducing cholesterol. Potassium, found in fiber-rich foods, helps to lower blood pressure, and a 10% loss of body weight can reduce the risk of developing chronic disease and significantly improve the management thereof. Improved gut health impacts overall health. So nutrition plays a big role in disease prevention and management. It is not enough just to take your chronic medication. It's very important to make adjustments to dietary intake as well. Poor management of chronic diseases leads to increased symptoms of the disease and therefore increased absenteeism. So this is a huge problem in the workplace. Complications of poor control, such as renal failure, stroke, or heart attack. Poor management leads to reduced work performance when at work, and it also leads to increased stress related to personal health. So a person that is living with a chronic disease that is not being well managed, that is a very stressful situation. A person who is constantly ill might also be fearful of losing their job. So all of these things are problematic. And obviously for the employer themselves, it's very difficult to have employees that are off of work all of the time. What we recommend and it's multitudes of studies have proven the Mediterranean diet to be very, very beneficial in improving health outcomes. It's high fiber, low fat, low salt, low sugar. Including fatty fish, such as pilchards often, is very beneficial. Choosing lean protein, which means removing visible fat. Include eggs, scrambled, boiled, or poached. If you fry eggs, it must be with very little oil. It's important to include lentils and beans at least 3 times a week. And you don't have to eat them by themselves. If you don't like the taste, you can incorporate them into your meat dishes, but it's really beneficial to incorporate them often. Add colorful vegetables as often as possible. And often people make the mistake of counting potatoes and sweet potatoes as vegetables. These are starches. So vegetables are colorful in nature, except for onions and cauliflower. And we want a variety as far as you can manage. And it's important to cook with minimal oil. So we shouldn't be deep frying any foods. We shouldn't be adding a lot of oil to curries and stews where you see it floating on the top. And it's important to use low-fat spreads instead of butter or brick margarines. The spreads that you find in tubs, you may or may not have noticed that they are not called margarine. They are called low-fat spreads, and they generally have 50% or less fat. And so it's not like the brick margarine. The hard margarine is 80% fat. Butter is 85% fat. Butter is animal fat, so it's saturated fat. And brick margarines are hydrogenated fats. So neither of those would be suitable for everyday use. So low-fat spreads using a thin spread is suitable, and they are often enriched with omegas, so that's a good choice. So that's fine to use. We want to predominantly use plant-based fats. Coconut oil and palm oil are the exception to plant fats. They are the only plant fats that are saturated in nature, and it's saturated fats that do promote heart disease. So I know coconut oil has become very, very popular of late, but it really is important to only use it if you feel it enhances the flavor of a dish or it's a certain cuisine you're making. But generally, canola oil for cooking. Olive oil is nice for like a salad dressing, or if you're making a dip like a hummus, you're going to use it in its raw form. But otherwise, minimal canola oil for cooking is perfectly fine. A low-fat tub spread on a sandwich, a little bit of mayonnaise. You can also, if you're making something like a coleslaw or chicken mayonnaise, you can add plain yogurt to the mayonnaise. And yeah, we do need to be careful with our fats, but we do need fat. Things like avocado, olives are good sources of fats, nuts, seeds, and then the fatty fish we'd like to include as well. Very important when we talk about the Mediterranean diet is it does refer to high fiber sources of carbohydrate, and we do need to include these at each meal. Even for a person living with diabetes, the answer is not to cut out carbohydrate. We're looking at brown rice or white rice with lentils or split peas added, barley, samp, bulgur wheat, potato with the skin, so do not peel your potatoes, sweet potato, and then whole wheat bread or wraps when you're looking for something quick and convenient. And if we want to look at specific messages for diabetes, it's very important to spread out the carbohydrate load. So not to eat more than 2 slices of bread, for example, in one sitting. So often people will tell me they head off to work without breakfast, then at 10 o'clock they sit down and eat 4 slices of bread and a cup of tea, and then they go wait until dinner. And you'll find that after they've had that 4 slices of bread, their blood sugar level will have it spiked drastically, but they won't know because they haven't actually tested it. So it's very, very important that they spread that load out. So it's fine. If that's what's in their budget, 4 slices of bread for their day's food intake, that's fine. They just must not eat it all in one sitting. So if they're going to have 2 slices at 10 and then another 2 slices at 2 and then go home at dinner, their blood glucose levels will benefit greatly from that one simple change. And then obviously if it's brown bread rather than white bread or low GI bread, that will also make a big difference. There must also, it's ideal to always add protein or fat to starch, not eating just carbohydrates alone. That does help to slow down the movement of glucose from the digestive system to the bloodstream. So it essentially lowers the GI of the starch if there's added protein or fat. It's important to spread meals out by 3 hours. So we want to have regular eating, but we don't want grazing. Very important to stay well hydrated. Anytime a person with diabetes is dehydrated, their blood glucose level will be elevated due to a low blood volume. It's very important to move after meals. This also helps to get the glucose into muscle and liver stores. And a good message to just always remember is if eating maize, allowing it to cool and reheating it before eating. And ultimately, if it's preferable if it's cooked the day before, this has a better effect on blood glucose levels. There's no fiber in maize, okay, but it is fortified with vitamins and minerals, so there is that benefit. So for people, if that's their staple and that's all that they can afford, that's one thing. Portion size is important, and allowing it to cool and then reheating it before eating will make a difference. It's also important for people living with diabetes to limit their fruit portions, I did mention this earlier, to tennis ball sized, and to include fruit as part of meals or snacks and not in the 3-hour gaps between meals, because then they're constantly topping up their glucose levels. And if we have a look at the role of the occupational health provider, very important, the screening of blood glucose, cholesterol, and blood pressure. But it's very important to discuss the results with the person, discussing the risks of uncontrolled chronic diseases and the complications that can arise as a result of not looking after these conditions. So people have often said to me, people with diabetes, but life is short, I'll just eat what I want. But I always encourage people to think long-term, to think about their long-term quality of life. And diabetes left unchecked can quickly turn into renal failure, which can quickly turn into 3 by 4 hours of dialysis per week. And I just feel like that is not quality of life. And if that can be avoided, I think that is preferable. And so I think it's important that people are informed so that when they make decisions about their health and their diet, they're actually making an informed decision rather than a misinformed decision. And I think it's always important to offer 2 to 3 relevant nutrition-related goals. So maybe it's more fiber, reduce sugar, drink a bit more water, move a bit more, whatever it might be that you see the patient would benefit from. And you could encourage things like group exercise. So maybe at lunchtime, people could go for a walk, even if it's around the parking lot. Even a 15-minute walk after everyone's eaten their meal will make a difference. Recipe sharing and bulk shopping and sharing, but we will talk a bit more about shopping. So that comes to nutrient-dense eating on a budget. I personally loathe to go grocery shopping at the moment. Food prices are increasing at a rapid rate. It's actually quite scary, especially in the last 2 months, I feel. But provided you dedicate your food budget to nutrient-dense foods, it is possible to achieve a nutrient-dense food intake. And the message should always be choose high fiber starches and add colorful vegetables as far as your budget allows. Okay. But people should also be encouraged to prioritize this over nutrient-empty foods. So People often feel that healthy food is more expensive, but you have to look deeper. You have to put a nutrient value to your spending. When you have a limited food budget, you can't really afford to spend money on nutrient empty foods. So any money spent on nutrient empty foods is essentially a waste and is therefore expensive. But if you look at a bag of apples, it might seem expensive. But if you're willing to spend 2/3 of that same money on a large packet of crisps, then you need to rethink your grocery budget goals and priorities. So a packet of apples would not only go much further than a large packet of crisps, but also the nutrient value thereof is what you're paying for. That's what you need to think about. On the flip side of the coin, however, it is cheaper to buy a donut than a ready-made chicken sandwich in a store. It is cheaper to buy a burger than a ready-made whole grain salad. It is cheaper to buy chocolate than to buy a ready-made smoothie. So the solution is simply don't put yourself in the position where you need ready-to-eat food. If you cannot afford to buy nutrient-dense ready-made meals, and I don't see that many people can, you need to carry food from home. If the lack of time to prepare food is a problem, which it is for a lot of people who are working full-time, who have families to care for, homes to maintain, it's important to find a few strategies. And these could be things like making extra dinner and carrying leftovers to work. You could meal prep a few lunches over the weekend. You could carry bread and toppings separately to work and make the sandwich at work. You could pack yogurt tubs, fruit, whole grain crackers, nuts, and have a picnic-style lunch. You could pack lunch boxes while preparing dinner. And this is also somewhere where you can get the whole family on board, that you all just hustle for an hour in the evening, making dinner, making lunch boxes, and then it's done. So it's important to prioritize nutrition. And so we have to find strategies that are practical. If we look at lentils, eggs, low-fat milk and yogurt, these are good sources of protein for meals without meat. So meat specifically is very expensive. So we can't always have meat at every meal, or maybe at lunch and dinner. It's not always practical. Or breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but we need to use other sources of protein because we do need the protein. Lentils and beans have both protein and fiber, which is a bonus. If you cannot buy brown rice, adding lentils to white rice will add the fiber that you're looking for. Stretching mince with lentils adds fiber and reduces the saturated fat per portion. And you can cook a whole bag of dried lentils and freeze it in 400-gram portions, which is the quantity of a tin. Because even tin foods are getting very pricey now, so you'll pay 20+ rand for a tin of lentils. So it would be much more cost effective to buy the bag of lentils. Now, a lot of people don't really like lentils or complain that it makes them bloat or gives them discomfort. The important thing when increasing things like legumes and fiber in general is to do it slowly, is to build up slowly, allowing your digestive system to adjust. So often people don't eat beans and then they go out on the weekend and have a big bean curry. You will experience discomfort. But if you have small, moderate portions regularly, you will stop experiencing that kind of discomfort. But there really is a dual bonus in having legumes in the diet because they come with both fiber and protein and a host of other nutrients. So they really are nutrition powerhouses and worth including as part of your nutrient-dense budget eating, certainly. And this doesn't have to just be lentils. You get lots of different dried beans that you can cook up and freeze in portions. Tinned fish is a good source of protein for muscle maintenance, but it also contains omega-3 fatty acids for brain health. And it's difficult to get enough omega-3. It is an essential nutrient, which means we have to get it from the diet. And I mean, we can't all take omega-3 supplements, so it's important to incorporate some tinned fish into the diet, some fatty fish, and you would be getting protein and the omega-3. So looking for foods that give you more bang for your buck. Milk is a good source of protein for muscle health, as well as calcium and phosphorus for bone health. So again, multiple benefits. Vegetables and fruits contain fiber for health and health and vitamins and minerals for immunity. So it's very important to include these. And I think a good message and thing to remind people is that vegetables also contribute some amount of protein to the diet. A lot of people are on a protein kick. Vegetables actually do give a few grams of protein as well. Potassium found in fruits and vegetables are important for muscle health. And you want to aim to include these foods as often as possible. So if you can focus your budget on these sort of foods, you will get multiple benefits out of making these choices. We have a look at some low-cost meal ideas. Oats with added grated apple or peanut butter rather than a lot of sugar. Bean and vegetable soups or stews. Having open sandwiches. So for example, a person who's needing to lose some weight, or a person with diabetes who can't control their blood glucose level, if they have 2 slices of bread, just having 1 slice of bread with a protein topping and whatever vegetable you can add. So for example, whole grain bread or toast with scrambled egg, tomato and onion could be a lovely lunch option. Tinned fish served with brown rice and salad or mixed vegetables. Savory mince, that is half lentils, half mince, grated carrot and other vegetables, topped with mashed potato as a cottage pie. That is a very nutrient-dense meal that can feed, a family, and it's all incorporated into one. And then I have this slide of 10 no-cost food swaps for nutrition wins. You could choose fat-free or low-fat milk instead of full cream milk. You can leave the skins on potatoes. You can reduce the sugar added to tea or coffee. Drink water rather than juice. Choose brown bread rather than white bread. Remove visible fat from meat and chicken before cooking. Avoid pastries. Reduce the amount of salt used in cooking. Do not add salt at the table. Use less oil for cooking. Some of these might even save you some money, but just making these changes would make a difference to the nutrient profile of your diet. If we look at nutrient-dense shopping on a budget, if we buy in bulk and share, most supermarket stores have their fresh produce, the less perishable items like gem squash, butternut, potatoes, onions. They have big bags, like 2 to 3 kgs, where you buy 4 bags for the price of 3. Most of the shops have that on offer, and that actually would suit a large family really nicely. But if you're a small family, you could pair up with another family, buy it and share it. The next month they could buy it, or however you want to do it, and then you buy different combinations each month to get a variety of vegetables in. But it is a good way to save money because it does work out very cost effective to do that. It is always a good idea to plan ahead, and reducing food waste saves money. So to plan a weekly or 2-weekly menu and shop accordingly to reduce waste. Keep frozen veg on hand for later in the month so that you always have some vegetables that you can prepare. Particularly nice is to keep like frozen spinach, frozen broccoli and cauliflower. Frozen spinach I like because preparing fresh spinach takes quite a lot of time and effort, and you cook it and you get left with virtually no spinach. So it's nice just to throw some frozen spinach into a minced dish, or often broccoli and cauliflower is very costly. And so having frozen options on hand, and then obviously frozen peas is always nice to have. But so that you always have something you can add to your meals for color. Buy seasonal fresh produce. This is very important. You will always see a massive difference in price if something is in season versus if it is out of season. So be very mindful of this. And this is why it's important to get used to eating a variety of foods. Because if you have a very limited palette of things you will eat, you're going to get caught out in some seasons where there's nothing that you will want to buy. And that's problematic. It's always a good idea to put together a file of 15 to 20 family favorite recipes to make meal planning easier. Then you can just choose your 5 meals for the week, do your shopping, you know how those meals are prepared, you know how much to buy, you know what to buy. It's done. It takes the work out of planning meals and cooking. I always say, as the person who is in charge of meals every day, it's not easy. It's not easy being the person who has to decide what to make, to shop for what to make, and then actually prepare it. And it gets walloped up in 10 minutes, and that's that. But a lot of effort goes into being the person who supplies the nutrients for the family. So you want to make it as easy for yourself as possible. It's important to look for specials on products that you routinely buy, but do not get caught out by specials on things that you don't need, because then that's not saving money. It's also important to find the balance between an overstocked pantry and not having money at the end of the month for nutrient-dense foods. And again, the role of the occupational health practitioner, sharing simple, budget-friendly recipes can go a long way to helping people who just need inspiration on what they can make their family for dinner. You can host a lunchbox makeover session, encourage people to bring lunch from home, but also always remember to discuss people's barriers to these things that you're asking them to do. And work with the canteen to promote budget-friendly, nutrient-dense options. If we look specifically at building a healthy workplace culture, as a nutrition advocate, the influence an occupational health practitioner has on behavioral change is of great importance. It is not enough to go on a diet to experience a meaningful and positive health outcome. Significant results come from changing lifestyle habits relating to dietary intake, food choices, nutrition beliefs, and physical activity. These changes have to be both practical and sustainable for them to make a difference and a lifelong difference. Behavioral change is more likely to be successful by working with a healthcare practitioner than through personal research, which, as we know, can be very conflicting. And I do believe that confidence can be imparted to some degree from person to person, which is another benefit of a wellness support program. So, for example, if you are sitting, engaging with a person, giving them practical advice on how they can make changes to improve their health outcomes, and you instill in them a confidence and you encourage them, they are far more likely to want to make those changes or feel that they can make those changes than if they read it on a screen somewhere. So I do think it's powerful when we have a personal connection with someone. Wellness interventions need to be easy to achieve and consistent to build a healthy workplace culture. Nutrition messages need to be simple and regular to keep the focus of health improvement top of mind. Supportive resources such as recipes should be easy to access. And any posters should be well designed, printed in color, and displayed in places where they will be seen. And if you haven't already discovered Canva, it's an online design program. There is a free version, and it is a wonderful way to make beautiful posters and resources and pamphlets for the people that you're working with. And on that note, I have a few resources that I will be sharing with you. I will be resending them to Lindy because I realized I would like to just add my details to them. But I'll be sending you a meal planning guide. So it's a mix and match meal planning guide. Some of my recipes, which are all economically friendly, a menu planning template, a grain bowl infographic, and an open sandwich infographic. So these are all to give inspiration, and ultimately they act as a list of foods that would make up a nutrient-dense diet. I also have a website, as you can see there, www.kellyfrancis.co.za, and I have added the canva.com website. If you haven't ever looked at it, go and have a look at that. All right, but that's the end of my talk, so thank you for listening. I will try to get back to the questions now.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks a lot for that. We just realized, I think, that we just need to prioritize and take a little bit of time to plan a bit. And it's wonderful that you can just motivate us again to do that. There are some questions. I'm not sure whose screen is now shared. Joannette, if you can just check for me. Somebody's screen has shared here. I have shared the question with you on WhatsApp as well, Kelly, for ease of reading for you.
All right, there we go.
So I will read it here. It's, hello, Kelly, what is your opinion on MNM, NAD, PQQ, Q10? There's a couple of them that she wants your opinion. What foods would provide safe dopamine and mitochondria support? Is Prenutri an option for severely thin diabetic person? Or other foods that provide selenium, and please give the difference between omega-3, 6, and 9, the benefits, the pros and the cons. It might take you quite a long time to answer this. If you want to give a bit more formal feedback, which I can share at a later stage, or what you can answer now on that question, Kelly.
Yes, that's quite a lot, but let me do my best now, and then I will have to send more information because I'm having a look at this. Most supplementation, you should be able to meet your nutrient requirements with diet. So that's first and foremost. And it's only if you have specific health-related conditions, disease conditions, or you're taking medications that interfere with absorption of nutrients, that maybe you would need to look at specific supplementation. So, for example, people on diabetic medication often battle with B12 levels, magnesium levels, then it would be good for them to supplement with those. So just having a look at that. I know, for instance, Q10 is often recommended for people who suffer with migraines alongside magnesium. And I'm not really sure what is meant here by MNAD, so I'd like a little bit more clarity on that. You need to be careful with any natural herbal supplementation, especially if you are on any other medication. And it's just always advisable that you talk to a healthcare practitioner when wanting to take any of these things, because the healthcare practitioner needs to know your whole big picture. What medications you're on, what health conditions you have. So it's important not to just randomly pick and choose supplements for what you feel that they might benefit. It's really always best just to spend your money on nutrient-dense foods. What foods provide safe dopamine and mitochondria support? It would be all the foods I've discussed. So high fiber foods, good quality protein sources, lean protein sources, having enough healthy fats in the diet, hydrating the body well. So that's going to support all the body's natural organ systems. Is Pronutro an option for a severely thin diabetic person? Pronutro does have added sugar, so the only Pronutro I would suggest for someone in this situation would be the whole wheat Pronutro, and you would have to just monitor blood glucose levels. Nuts and seeds would be a good source of selenium, sesame seeds particularly. And there is a bread that Woolworths does that has got added selenium. And omega-3, 6, and 9. Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. Omega-6 and 9 are pro-inflammatory. We generally can get plenty of omega-6 and 9 from our diets. It's from nuts and seeds, plant oils, and things like that. Omega-3 we get from fatty fish. That's more difficult, and you actually need to eat fatty fish 3 times a week to get enough omega-3. There are some plant sources of omega-3, but the body doesn't absorb them quite as well. So if you were supplementing, don't supplement with omega-3, 6, and 9. Just supplement with omega-3 because they are going to counteract each other.
Okay, interesting. Right, and the next question was, hi, Kelly, can you give your opinion on energy drinks? Some of them have vitamins in.
If you're taking just a vitamin blend, so just something that's giving you a vitamin boost, but it's got no other added caffeine or herbal things in it, that's fine. If it's just a way of taking vitamins, you do get vitamin fizzies that you just put in water and drink them. That's fine if that's your vitamin supplementation. But it would be really best to get your energy from food. And you should only be supplementing with vitamins if you have a deficiency. So if you're very fatigued and very low in energy and you're not coping, it is always best to see a doctor and see if there's any specific blood markers that show that you are deficient, and then correct those deficiencies appropriately, because then you can get a proper script for high dose of vitamin D, vitamin B, magnesium, and get those levels up more quickly. And that would be far more beneficial to you, and obviously also changing your diet accordingly.
I do know,
sorry,
I do know we do struggle with the employees. They do drink a lot of, have 2 to 3 a day.
Yeah, it is a
work.
huge problem, and they're widely available, and they're not that expensive either if you compare it to other things. But we do know that having too many energy drinks has led to negative side effects. So it depends, and it probably, for people who have underlying conditions and are at risk for developing heart disease, would be more susceptible to the negative consequences of having energy drinks. But it's very important that whatever you consume should have some nutrient benefit to you. A few vitamins is not going to be adequate nutrient benefit to undo the harmful effects of some energy drinks. So the caffeine, for example, and the other things that they have added to them to give the energy boost is problematic. So water in itself, just hydrating adequately with water, should help people feel less fatigued, and eating appropriately should help them feel less fatigued.
So the last question that was posted, and I see I've got one hand up that we will just go to Elise just now, is intermittent fasting considered skipping meals?
Yes. So intermittent fasting, it reduces your eating window to a small window for some people, and you would not be able to meet your fiber requirements if you're only eating 1 to 2 meals a day. It's near impossible to eat 8 to 10 servings of high fiber food in 2 meals a day. So for people who do extreme intermittent fasting, that is where they're really going to miss out, is fiber. And yeah, ultimately it's just reducing food intake, and that's why you see weight loss with that. and it makes you more mindful. So if you stop eating after dinner, what is it that people normally eat after dinner? Chocolates and sweets and things like that. So naturally you'll see weight loss if you stop doing that. But yes, I would consider that skipping meals, because you are unlikely to actually meet your fiber requirement, which is essential to health.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Elise.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can do it. Allow mic. Okay, Elisa, you can just unmute yourself and you can ask your question for Kelly. I see your hand is raised. While Elise is unmuting, there is a comment. I think our drivers, especially long distance, are a group of employees that would benefit from healthy eating tips and awareness. Maybe canteens should supply healthy lunch packs and snacks for the road with input from the clinic.
Yes, that would be a very important one, because if you think of what they have access to on the road, if they don't pack their own food, it's really limited. Garage shops are expensive. You really would be hard pressed to find a nice nutrient dense meal on a budget in a garage shop or like a truck stop. And they really need to be have proper energy for the task that they have on hand. They need to be alert. So I do think that would be a good focus area to provide education, but also the means for a decent meal, so a packed meal. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. That is the questions from now. Thanks a lot, Kelly. We really, really appreciate it. We're looking forward to the information you're going to share. And as soon as I receive it from Kelly, I will then share it with the members. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kelly.
No, it's such a pleasure. All the best.
Thank you. Right. So our next guest speaker, let me just see, is Reinhard Hesse, and he has joined us. So, Reinhard, can you hear me? Are you there? While I introduce you, you are more than welcome to start sharing your presentation.
Sure, I'll do exactly that.
Okay, perfect. Right, so originally from Hartbeespoort in the Northwest Province, Reinhard completed his medical degree at the University of Pretoria in 2014, followed by an internship at Rob Ferreira Hospital in Mpumalanga in 2015 and 2016. He stayed on at the hospital in 2017 to complete his community part of internal medicine. In 2018, he began as a registrar training in chemical pathology through the National Health Laboratory Service and WITS, qualifying in 2021. He joined Pathcare in 2022 and worked in Gauteng region for 2.5 years. And then he joined us in July 2024 here in Pathcare's Boland-Oeverberg region, where he's now based in Somerset West. I'm sure the wind was something to get used to, Reinhard, in Somerset West. His interests include lipidology, cardiovascular risk reduction, laboratory informatics, and data analytics. The LC-MS, MS-based testing, I don't know what that is, and is also involved in clinical education and outreach, supporting healthcare professionals across disciplines in making effective use of laboratory medicine. So thank you, Reinhard and Cheryl from Pathcare, that you are spending a couple of minutes with us on Back to Basics, and that is on urine dipsticks. You may share your presentation.
Thank you. Can you see the presentation? I have shared it. Is it visible?
Let me see if it's my, I don't have, yeah, yes, perfect.
We can see it, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction. Sorry, I think that's almost longer than the talk. Just confirm, would you like a 10 or a 15-minute talk? How much time availability do you have?
Joannette?
You can talk as much as you want. We just want to finish the meeting at 4 o'clock. We just need to go through our presentation too.
Never tell a chemical pathologist they can talk as much as they want. You'll regret it.
15 minutes.
Into the Krebs cycle. Now, I'll try to keep it at 15 minutes, and I'll also happy to share the presentation with you, so you don't need to write frantically or anything. If any of the information is useful to you, yeah, I'll obviously just email it afterwards and it can be distributed. Okay, so I was asked just to touch on the topic of urine dipstick, especially like how to interpret them and the utility, seeing that you use them quite a lot, and it's a very useful tool, especially if used in conjunction with formal testing. And the topic that I chose to focus on is what to do with what you see, because it is obviously a colorimetric site-based test. So just a background, it's a powerful test, but it is unfortunately, as everything in life, slightly imperfect. It's a rapid bedside screening tool, as all of you know. And in the word screening tool, that implies certain things. It usually means that it's relatively cheap, it can be done quite quickly, and you get the results almost immediately. And its role is more to rule out disease than to confirm disease. So with other words, we talk about prioritizing sensitivity at the cost of specificity. That's fine because that's exactly where it's being used, and if it's done correctly, that's not an issue at all, because it's not your gold standard test. It's to screen the masses and then filter them down and then choose who you want to test further. And broadly speaking, because you're testing urine, which should ideally be fresh urine, urine obviously is the final end product of the body's urinary tract excretion. But that urine, before it became urine or even entered the urinary tract, was obviously blood. So basically anything in the circulation of the body can theoretically, or not anything, but a lot of substances that can end up in the urine. And broadly speaking, your urine dipstick can be divided into two. It shows you some of the tests are to do with systemic pathology, specifically things like diabetes, TKA, and liver dysfunction, and we'll touch on the specific tests a bit later on. And then some of the stuff is obviously more of the local diseases in the urinary tract, such as your urinary tract infections, also renal impairment, hematuria, and things like that. So it doesn't tell you immediately where the substance came from, just that either systemically or locally it picked up some analyte that is of interest and obviously above the normal expected range. As you also know, it's obviously a semi-quantitative test, meaning that you don't get the result in like millimole per liter or something like that. It's just negative, trace, 1 plus, 2 plus, or 3 plus, which is perfectly fit for its purpose. It just broadly categorizes these patients, and basically the different colors are coded at different thresholds to change color as the concentration increases. It is, however, unfortunately prone to interference. I've just listed some of the common types of interferences. Obviously, if there's sample contamination, here we think especially in females being tested, if they are menstruating, you might get blood contamination. Vaginal flora might obviously also cause some of the analytes to register. So very important on how you collect the sample. Very dilute urine will obviously decrease the concentration of all of the analytes of interest. That can bring, the issue there is that you can get false negatives. And there we use the specific gravity sort of as a quality control tool, which I'll get to in the next slide as well. And medication and diet, various things that can interfere. Obviously, anything that colors the urine will definitely have an effect on the urine dipstick because it works on a color principle. So, as you know, if you eat too much beetroot, the urine gets a tinge of color, and that will obviously interfere with most of the tests, especially those that depend on turning pink or red. So, all of these things must be kept in mind, as well as various medications. However, it's not possible to screen the patient for each and everything, and as this is a screening test, it's rather better just to use it, and if you do get positives, then follow the appropriate escalation pathway, because with the more appropriate tests later on, many of these interferences will then be sort of ruled out or confirmed if it's really a true pathology. And again, protocol matters. The better you follow the protocol, and here's just a basic general universal protocol. Obviously, you probably have your own protocol, which is maybe in more depth, and obviously the manufacturer of these kits also do the effort in the package inserts and to also give you instructions, and it's also always worthwhile to read that and also look if there's ever any changes. But we really try to get a clean catch midstream sample. As you know, that means not the very first void urine, not the last bit of urine, somewhere in between. So it's strong flowing urine that's ideally minimally contaminated with the urethral opening of the patient. Before you put in the dipstick, just have a look at the urine macroscopically, see, is it discolored? Does it look weird? Is it offensive? Because that informs your decision. Obviously, if it's severely discolored, it might not even be worth doing the urine dipstick. It might just be worth doing formal testing or asking the patient, why is your urine discolored, and maybe it's just a dietary influence, and they can rather get retested in a day or two, which will save your urine dipstick and save you scratching your head and figuring out why is this patient's leukocytes or nitrates raised. Ideally, it should be tested immediately or as soon as possible, but at least within 1 hour. Anything more than that, then there's secondary bacterial growth that can happen, which obviously will give a false positive signs of a possible infection. Make sure that you wait the appropriate amount of time before interpreting. As a minimum, you can start reading the first test at 30 seconds, but some of them, especially the leukocytes, take up to 2 minutes for the leukocyte esterase reaction to take place. So make sure what your specific package insert says and adhere to that, because you will get false negatives if you look too quickly and you don't give it time to react. And then lastly, and very important, I'm going to mention it a few times during this talk, interpret it with the clinical context. So if a patient has typical signs of UTI, for instance, and then you get positive tests, that really makes a strong case. However, if there's absolutely no signs or symptoms and just the leukocytes is positive, that's not as strong of a case. So it's very important not to look at laboratory tests, and that's true for all laboratory tests, not just a urine dipstick or screening test. Don't look at it in isolation. Look at it with keeping in mind the patient's complaints and his medical history. I've grouped them then just into 2 main categories, looking at local infection, which I think is probably one of the most important things that the dipsticks are usually used for, and they're very useful for this. And here we focus really on 3 analytes: the leukocytes, the nitrates, and the blood. So the leukocytes is just a fancy name for white cells. As you know, in your blood, you have at all times a low normal concentration of leukocytes circulating, looking for possible infection and fighting it off. Your urine usually has no leukocytes. So any leukocytes in your urine is a sign of concern. But the moment there's inflammation or infection in your urinary tract, the body responds by sending white blood cells out of the blood into the urinary tract tissue, which some of it basically gets shed into the urine. Just important to note here, I said inflammation or infection. So if you, for instance, have a patient is in a motor vehicle accident and they have severe pressure on their bladder and they have trauma on their bladder, they will have bruising, they have inflammation of the bladder wall, the body will respond by sending leukocytes. They will have leukocytes in the urine, but this is not an infection. That is just inflammation. So you can't use it to say, oh, it's definitely infection. It's either inflammation or infection, you don't know for sure. And that's why the nitrates comes in, which I'll talk about next. But so any leukocytes that is positive, it is abnormal, and you must ask why. Either it's infection or inflammation. And if the patient has typical UTI symptoms, you would be warranted to already start empiric antibiotic therapy just based on the leukocytes, but that's it, if it's a clear clinical picture, and ideally also send a sample for microscopy, culture, and sensitivity while you start the antibiotics, just to confirm the diagnosis and check for the sensitivity to see whether you've put them on the right antibiotics. But in an ideal world, you'd also want to you're obviously testing the nitrates, but you'd also want the nitrates to be positive. The reason for that is the body itself does not produce nitrates. What happens is gram-negative bacteria, such as E. coli, which is one of the common common causes of a urinary tract infection, they basically chew up nitrate and then turn it into nitrite. So if you see nitrite, that's a sure sign that there's a gram-negative bacteria in the urine. That's the only way that it can be there, except for obviously some rare interferences. But other than that, nitrite means there's a gram-negative bacteria present. So that's a really neat thing to know, because that's also the most common type of urinary tract infection are the gram-negatives. So if you have that, especially if coupled with the leukocytes, that's a very strong chance of infection. So that supports the urinary tract infection diagnosis, and you would definitely be justified to start empiric treatment, especially if the patient is symptomatic. Then lastly, blood is sort of a more broad one that can fit in here, because if you have severe urinary tract infection, the blood will be there will be a small trace of blood or 1 or 2 plus. Obviously, various other things can also cause blood. So what does the blood actually indicate on the urine dipstick? So it is either positive if there's hemoglobin or the full red blood cell in which the hemoglobin is carried, or very importantly, myoglobin. Now, myoglobin is the energy carrier in muscle cells. So if a patient has severe muscular trauma, they will also leak myoglobin into the urine, and the area for blood will be positive, although it's not technically blood, it's blood's cousin, myoglobin, but it reacts similarly to the hemoglobin molecule. Again, if a patient has once off 1 plus blood, it's not necessarily a reason to worry. There might have been some light trauma or something, especially if there's history. But if there's persistent 1 plus, without what you measured it a second time and it's still there, or if there's 2 plus or more, that's a reason to be concerned. So that can either be due to infection, especially if the leukocytes and the nitrates are positive, or it can be due to something other such as bladder cancer, trauma, or a whole host of things. So definitely if you get 2 plus blood or persistent 1 plus, you do need to send the urine for microscopy to confirm under a microscope that it is in fact blood. And then obviously, depending on the clinical history, either investigate the patient for cancer or for trauma or for urinary stones. So basically, if you have, just to summarize here again, if you have leukocytes, nitrates, and symptoms, you have a very high likelihood of a UTI. But of course, know that contamination, especially in women, is a very big pitfall, because not only can blood, obviously during menstruation, cross-react or contaminate rather, but if there's also vaginal flora that interfere during the collection, remember those can also have leukocytes and nitrates. You get this false picture and think the patient has a urinary tract infection. Meanwhile, it's just a very poorly collected sample. Moving on to the more systemic analytes, or analytes that give you an idea of more systemic problems, starting with protein. Most of the protein that we measure is albumin. What's nice about albumin is albumin's size is 60 kilodalton. Now this sounds very specific, but why I mention it is the glomerulus of the kidneys selects from 50 kilodalton. In other words, all molecules smaller than 50 kilodaltons can pass freely into the urine, and all molecules larger than 50 kilodalton should be held back. So albumin should be held back in a normal functioning kidney. So it's a very nice analyte to check how how a patient's glomerulus is functioning. In other words, how good is the filter of the kidney still filtering. So again, if you have once off 1 plus protein, it's not a reason to worry, because a heavy bout of fever or heavy exercise can cause 1 plus protein, and it's not a reason to worry. But if there's persistent 1 plus, that's a reason to worry. Or if there's at any given stage 2 plus or 3 plus, that's definitely a reason to worry. The first step to do there is to repeat it with the early morning urine, because the protein is known to increase as the day goes on. So your early morning urine is supposedly the one with the least protein contamination if you're normal. And if that's still positive, definitely the patient needs a formal urine albumin creatinine ratio to look at the amount of albumin that's leaking through the kidneys. And if that's significant, obviously a full investigation for chronic kidney disease. Glucose, again, the kidney is sort of programmed to keep anything, if the blood glucose is anything below 10.1 millimole per liter, which is fairly high, it will keep back the glucose. But if it's more than that, it overwhelms the kidney, and it basically spills over into the urine, and you get glucose in the urine. So of course, if the dipstick is positive, it indicates that there's high blood glucose concentration, and immediately you have to think about something like diabetes mellitus. Again, 1 plus, maybe not the worst, but if the moment it's 2 plus or more, definitely you need to check the patient's glucose. And if that's high, HbA1c, unless the patient is known, in which case probably the patient should, in any case, have a follow-up HbA1c and see if the treatment is still effective. And obviously, if it's a newly diagnosed diabetes, must be referred for proper initiation of treatment. The ketones is a product that's formed. You talked earlier about I've caught the last of the previous presentation about the keto, or not the keto diet, the time-restricted fasting diet. And basically in those cases, your body goes into fatty acid oxidation. And one of the products that the body then runs on is ketones. So whenever a patient is starved, with other words, not eating food for any time longer than 8 hours, they will start to create ketones. So it's not necessarily always a pathological finding, especially if the patient hasn't eaten in 8 hours. But of course, we know that the diabetic patients have very high urine or blood and urine ketone levels, and that's very problematic because they could be going into diabetic ketoacidosis. And pregnant patients also have fairly high ketone levels. So in any positive ketones, especially in diabetics, is a red flag, and you again need to check the glucose, assess if there's DKA, and obviously refer appropriately if necessary. If it's just a normal patient that says, I haven't eaten for 8 hours and it's not a diabetic and I was fine, you don't really need to worry about it further. Bilirubin, so it measures the conjugated bilirubin, and conjugated bilirubin basically means the liver transform it into water-soluble bilirubin. If that is raised, it means there is obstruction or stasis of the liver, because the liver would normally have excreted it into the gastrointestinal system. But if it can't be excreted into the gastrointestinal system, it goes into the blood and then eventually ends up in the urine. So any positive bilirubin is a sign to worry, and you do need to do formal liver function tests on the bloods to see what the level of the total bilirubin is, and the conjugated bilirubin and the other liver enzymes to see what the situation is, and then probably from there imaging. Urobilinogen is similar to bilirubin, but something slightly different. So basically, if red blood cells break down, they form bilirubin eventually, but then they go into the gastrointestinal tract, and their bacteria converts it into urobilinogen. Now, most of the urobilinogen is basically excreted in the feces. Some of it is taken up by the liver again and sort of metabolized, and a very small percentage, I think 1%, is actually excreted in the urine. But the moment it's increased, so if it's 1 or 2 plus on the urine dipstick, it just basically means that either this patient is breaking down red blood cells at a higher extent that the liver can cope with, or the liver is not doing its function in detoxifying it. So there's maybe liver damage, something like cirrhosis or something. Again, in that case, you'd want to do a liver function test. You probably also want to do a full blood count to see what the HP is doing and the platelets are doing, whether that's maybe hemolysis. And then lastly, pH and specific gravity, I sort of grouped them together, but you can actually have them separately. The pH obviously shows you the relative acidity of the urine. Those are used really for very niche metabolic cases, so I'm not going to go into that detail, but the specific gravity just tells you how watery the urine is. Water has a specific gravity of 1 or 1.000, and then so urine is usually more concentrated than water, so usually like anything from 1.01 upwards. So if it's low, then it just means the patient is very overhydrated. And you must just know that then the other stuff might have false negatives, because the urine might be so diluted that some of the other stuff didn't pick up. So in such a patient where the specific gravity is close to 1, you might want to have them retested when they're not so overhydrated. And obviously, the more dehydrated the patient is, the higher the specific gravity will be. But in most cases, other than sort of a quality check, you don't really need to refer a patient specifically for pH or specific gravity. Just some of them, I'm almost finishing off now. This is just some of the key takeaways, and there will be a bit of repetition, but I think it's important that we just do this. So in which cases do you not have to worry too much? If there's only trace protein with no symptoms, as I said, that can just be due to fever or due to heavy exercise. If there's a trace leukocyte, but the patient is totally asymptomatic and the nitrites are not positive, and if the specific gravity, as I mentioned just now, is less than 1.010 in a hydrated worker, that's not a sign to worry, but you might just want to have it repeated when they're not so overhydrated to look properly at the other analytes. What are sort of your ones to not panic, but just investigate further? If there's even 1+ ketones in a diabetic, you do need to check their blood glucose. If there's 1+ protein in a hypertensive worker, you need to check their kidneys, because one of the damages of hypertension is renal disease. And if they do have chronic renal disease, you want to catch it early. And if there's any blood more than trace, and you don't have any evidence of menstruation or trauma, then you need to do proper microscopy to see if it is indeed blood, and then take it further, because, as I've mentioned before, the causes could be quite severe. And then when should you definitely act or refer immediately? If there's 3+ glucose, you do need to check the patient's HbA1c or glucose, because that means the blood glucose is extremely high, and it's either it's probably an undiagnosed diabetic or a very uncontrolled diabetic. As mentioned earlier, if there's leukocytes, nitrates, and symptoms together, that's a UTI until proven otherwise. And if there's 3+ blood in an older worker, you must think malignancy. So that's definitely a reason to refer for proper work, or for microscopy and proper workup. And as I've mentioned, bilirubin or high urobilinogen, that's always indicative of some kind of liver problem. So it's definitely worth referring and doing LFT to look at that. Importantly, as I mentioned in the first slide, the clinical finding and suspicion always supersedes a normal or a negative dipstick finding. So it is nice to do the dipsticks. They are very helpful, and they rule in or out most of the patient. But if somebody gives you typical signs of complaints about typical UTI, for instance, say, even if the dipstick isn't positive, I would at least repeat it on the next day or something like that, because the clinical history is more important than just a negative test. Or if you really then need to make sure and you have a bad feeling about something, even if you have a normal dipstick, you can ask for formal testing. That would be the appropriate thing to do, and not ignore the patient's history. Okay, the key takeaways. Again, it's a screening tool, it's not a diagnosis. So it's used to raise flags and not to close the case. It's not the final step in a diagnostic pathway, it's the very first step. Protocol matters. Make sure it's a clean catch, fresh sample, and make sure of the timing of the reading. Remember, think local and systemic. Some of the things can be raised and give an indication of local diseases such as UTIs, and some of the things are more systemic, like your bilirubin and your glucose and your ketones. And of course, some analytes are more powerful when you interpret them together, as I've demonstrated. And again, just the Kemp and me reiterating, if in doubt, refer for formal testing. Again, dipsticks are great, they can handle the masses, but you will have 1 or 2% of patients that definitely need more formal testing because it has higher sensitivity and specificity to make more sure of a specific symptom or a specific finding. Thank you very much. That is my talk. I'm open for any questions, and as I said, I'm happy to also share that with you.
Perfect. Thanks, Mo. Very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Esa. Let me see. There's a hand raised. Let me see if I can put it on. Whose hand is it? Janet, you must help me. I don't know if I've got all the privileges to unmute somebody. Where was that raised hand now? I don't see it. Maybe the hand was taken down. Let me check the Q&A session. No questions. I think you've done a very good job. They all understand very well. And then there's no questions. So thanks a lot, Dr. Esa. I really, really appreciate it for you taking the time.
You're very welcome. I'll send a presentation to you afterwards, and then you can distribute to whoever's interested.
Will do. Will do.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Right, thank you, Joannette. So you can take over for the meeting.
Thank you, Lindy. I'm just waiting for my screen to share. Then we jump to the next slide. Okay, so we have had a look at, sorry, I just want to hide presenter view. We've had a look at the finances. Adele has presented it. Can I have somebody to accept it for me, please? Laurentia Turner, thank you for accepting that. Can I have one person? And Cheryl Ann seconded. Laurentia and Cheryl Ann. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next slide is the marketing report. Adele, you are welcome to continue.
Hi, Janette. I just wanted to say with the marketing report, we are always looking for new suppliers of goods and services. We've got our trusted and loyal service providers, but if anyone out there know of anyone that they order something from or that has any services that they can recommend, please get in touch with me, and then we also then encourage them to be maybe 5-minute speakers at our meetings, and then that promotes their services and we learn what is out there in the market. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindy, over to you.
All right, can I just share my screen?
Welcome.
Reshare. Right, can you see, Joannette?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Right, so I know we are pressed for a little bit of time, so just a quick feedback. We are all now in our July meeting. Our next meeting is on the 27th of August. We've got a general meeting and it's about AI and occupational health. But before our next general meeting, we have our kaleidoscope on fitness to work. If you have not yet registered, please, it's going to be very interesting. It's face-to-face. It's again in Durbanville Conference Center. Then the health calendar for the year, this is for the month of August. I've just highlighted the 9th of August is National Women's Day. I hope all of you have planned something nice to spoil yourself with. Please do. The upcoming courses, Health Science Academy, we all know them well, Audiospiro Vision. So there are the dates. If you need more information, please contact them, and then EFHA as well. If you do know of other people that does these courses and you want me to get the information, please share it with me and I can advertise that as well. Then what I want to I don't know if you guys are receiving these emails from Sasha National. If you do, please, you still have access to the journal. If you receive this email, that link, you log in, and there is the Occupational Health Journal with some nice articles for you to read. For those of you who do not know that you've got access to it. So the CPD points, the March workshop was received. The CPD points, I have done the certificate. It was emailed. The CPD application will also be done for our Fit for Purpose workshop now next Friday. And obviously, SANC has not yet started it, so we are just continuing the pilot study on the CPD. Okay, there's my advert, Fit for Purpose, from 8 to 3 next Friday. And we are going to do linking fitness to job demands. We have conducting a comprehensive fitness assessment and what it entails. Then we have an attorney that's going to talk about the legal boundaries. And understanding the certificate of fitness is going to be an OMP, and what to do on disability and incapacity from the insurer side. So we're going to have somebody from an insurer, temporarily or permanently unfitted this person, and what they need from us, and how it the whole process evolves. And we're going to close the day with some practical real life case studies, which an OMP is also going to do for us. So I've got today's question quick. Joannette, if you can put the poll on Teams, that you can please answer the question. This is the question. You are appointed to consult for a small factory where the workers are exposed to intermittent high noise levels above 90 dBA in a confined space. They are complaining of ear discomfort and fatigue are increasing, and management wants a quick fix. But you must recommend a sustainable intervention. So which one of the following innovative and feasible approaches would be best demonstrated by you as an occupational health practitioner? A, recommend immediate distribution of disposable earplugs to all the workers and document the compliance weekly. Suggest relocating the workers to quieter areas during high noise operations. Or C, design a phased hearing conservation program involving noise mapping, worker training, collaboration with engineering for long-term noise control measures. Or D, ask the workers to rotate their job tasks more frequently to reduce overall time in noisy areas. So please choose an answer, submit for us. We're going to give it a minute, Joannette. I don't know how many people has responded, and give a minute or two for you to choose the correct answer, the most correct answer, right?
10 responses so far, 12. Let's see if
Okay.
we can hit the 20 mark.
Right. I see we are 51 on.
Yes.
So yeah, perfect. I see some people answering. Let's see. 14. Some people just written the answer. See?
Okay, let's see. Almost there. We need 4 more. 17 responses. We'll give you a few more seconds. Almost there. Right, Lindy, are you happy with the responses?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Joannette. So well done,
Okay.
people. We had how many responses in total?
I didn't count
See.
the chats, but the ones for, sorry, let me just see. It was 17 last time.
16, 17,
that I
18,
looked.
19, and about 10. Okay, perfect.
19
So,
on the poll itself.
oh, okay. Right. Perfect, guys. So 84% of you and those who didn't voted on the poll but gave the answer in the chat are correct. It is to design a phased hearing conservation program. Right. So what is a hearing conservation program? And the reason why I want to highlight this for you guys is we all know there's the new noise exposure regulation. It has been gazetted and we have 18 months to implement it. And I also focus in that regulation on a hearing conservation program. And we all know we should have it and do some research. Not a lot of people do have it. So what it is a structured and proactive approach implemented in workplaces to prevent occupational noise-induced hearing loss. It's not NIHL anymore, it's ONIHL. So you need to have this program. It's a legal and a health management system where we identify the noise exposure. We want to prevent hearing damage. We all know this. We want to monitor the hearing ability. We want to educate and empower our workers. And the NER, the noise exposure regulation, the new one, it defines it as a documented systematic process for anticipating, identifying, analyzing, and controlling exposure to noise through the sub-regulations of the NER. So our key components which should be in your hearing conservation program is your noise risk assessment, your noise surveys, which should be done by an AIA that is registered with SANAS or accredited with SANAS and registered with the Department of Labour. You must have your engineering and administrative controls that you are implementing in, the provision and the use of hearing protection devices. What tests are we going to do? When are we going to do the test? How often we are going to do it? The training and education as well as the record keeping of this. So we know it's important because once it's legal compliance, but it's not always about legal compliance, it's about doing the right thing for early detection, preventing hearing loss, keeping our employees educated and productive and giving them a quality of life. From the business side, we want improved productivity, efficiency, and prevention of injuries and diseases or accidents, sorry. It's cost saving because there will hopefully be less compensation claims, absenteeism, and errors related to poor communication. And then from the government perspective, this is in the NER, a workplace that is safe and without risk to the health of the employees. There are no other Department of legislation that I know of currently. So we'll see you on the 8th for the workshop. I see there was a question on the group Joanette. We will reshare the program on the group. And then on the 27th of August, we have our next general meeting. Thank you, Joanette.
Okay, great. Just scroll to see, Lindy, will you share the program on the chat if possible?
Okay, yes, I'll do.
Yeah, okay, right. Thank you. Sorry to ask you. I just going to forget. Let me just go back and share my screen again. We're just waiting for it to work. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Lindy. Next up is Paula. I don't know if Paula's in the meeting. I don't see him. And then we move on to Beverly. Beverly, you are welcome to talk about your project.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, for Mandela Day, our social responsibility, we chose the Somerset West Family Shelter. It's one of its own of a kind in the country, and it accommodates people who are displaced. And we had some donations, which we took over to the shelter, and they were greatly appreciative of it. So for the coming up meeting on the 8th, we are going to have a box, and you can bring a donation. It's Women's Day, so maybe a face cloth, a bar soap, or toothbrush, something that we can hand over to them. We will be going again after the 8th of August to hand over our donations to them. And thank you very much for those who donated. Thank you, Leonette.
Thank you. And I've jumped one. Okay, just a quick glance over the guidelines. We were given these 3 guidelines. I know I asked for people to join, but the time pressure just got to us. We need to present it at Exco in August. So if any of you still want to contribute, you are very welcome. The salary survey is something we're also going to discuss at Exco. I will provide feedback when we are done there. And then the newsletter, it's also due at the beginning of August. As soon as it is done, I will post it on the group. And then the Western Cape, as I mentioned last time, was awarded the opportunity to host the academic day for 2026. And we've decided to make the theme Christmas and Winter, a very exciting theme. We are still in the beginning stages of the planning, and as we go along, we'll share it with you. And then, as Lindy also mentioned, our Fit for Purpose workshop, the Kaleidoscope, for the 8th of August. I've put the link in the chat if you still want to join. The exhibitors usually join us in the same hall as the presentations, and that takes up a lot of space, which limits the amount of seats that we can give to people who attended. So the interest in this has been huge. So we urge you to register for this if you need to. If you need to make an arrangement with regards to the payment, please do so with myself or Adele. If your company can so long provide us with a PO number and pay later, that's also fine. Just book your seat so that we at least know that you are coming. It's really important. And then the WhatsApp group, I've shared the link again in the chat. If you're not in the WhatsApp group yet, please ask us to add you. Give us your cell phone number. All the important things are shared on there. And then if you want to quickly try and scan this, as I say, I also mentioned this in the chat. I'm going to give it 5 seconds. Great, and then Dorothy, she's behind the scenes. Thank you for your hard work. We appreciate everything you are doing. You don't hear her talk, you don't see her often, but she's doing a great job as the secretary. Beverly has taken over as the committee secretary, which means that she's assisting the committee with all their administrative needs. And then here's the caregivers list, it's a short list. Take note of this. I also shared this picture in the chat if you want to go back to it afterwards. If you have any problems, contact your caregiver. If your surname starts with that letter, please contact the person that's allocated for that. And then this is Sashon Head Office's contact details. If you've got any questions about Sashon membership, you can contact Adele Duma. And anything to do with audio membership, the registration about the audio registration list, anything with regards to the audios, you can contact Gita Berg. Remember that these two people work only half day, Adele in the morning and Gita in the afternoon. So if you send an email outside of their working hours, they only respond the next day, but they usually come back quite quickly. And that's it. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being in this meeting for so long. If there is no questions, I'm quickly going to share a very quick poll with you, if it loads, just to find out how you find these meetings. Please give us your feedback. And that's it. I declare the meeting closed. You can leave the meeting if the committee. Yes.
It's a raised hand.
Okay. I don't see it.
I think it was Suki.
Suki. Suki, give me a moment.
Suzanne, it is gone now again. Suzanne, you still want to ask a question? No, doesn't seem like it. Maybe it was an error.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, people. We appreciate it. Committee, just stay behind if you don't mind.
Was hy Johanet? Ek dink almal is daar.
Ek het nou 'n verkeerde knoppie gedruk, nou bel ek iemand uit tog. Alright, baie dankie julle. Dit was 'n baie goeie meeting gewees. Ons het 'n bietjie minder mense gehad as gewoonlik, maar dis fyn. Dit is nog steeds genoeg. Baie dankie. Lindy, dankie vir die speakers. Hulle was excellent gewees.
Ek dink ook dat is nogals oulik geweest, ja.
Ja, hulle was baie oulik. Enigiets wat julle wil bydra?
Nee,
Nou.
niks van my kan ek nie. Ek dink ook die speakers was uitstekend geweest. Dankie Lindy.
Ja,
Nee, dankie
dis
aan
hoekom ek
jou.
hulle makkaas gegee het om 'n bietjie langer te praat. Die inligting wat hulle gee is baie waardevol.
Ja, very
Alright, julle moet 'n
informative.
baie lekker middag hê en dan
Dankie.
gesels ons weer. Mooi bly
Dankie.
julle.
Bye.
Mooi
Bye-bye.
bly. Bye.